On today's episode, I talk to my dear friend Lee Harris. He's the author of The Future Human and several other titles. A gifted energy intuitive and channeler, he leads a vibrant online community that reaches 1 million people every month. His acclaimed online events and members community, which is called The Portal, are adventures into the deepest aspects of living, loving, and awakening. Regina Meredith is a broadcast journalist who is known for making the most challenging topics accessible to all. She has worked for NBC, PBS, and is currently the host of Open Minds on Gaia TV. Today, Lee and I talk about his new book, The Future Human. We also talk about his tour here in Australia, which is super exciting. I'll be going to the Byron Bay event, which is so good. He is, just to remind everyone, a 1/4 sacral generator, cross of the 4 ways. And this human, as I've said before, is absolutely the real deal. His work that he's done as a channel with the Z's is mind-blowing. And he's got loads of books that he's written, or at least, I suppose, co-written with the Z's that he channels over the years, and is an incredible musician as well. I actually listen to a lot of his music when I'm meditating, when I'm journaling. I use it a lot on retreats because it is just this beautiful high frequency experience. Now, I do just want to have a little bit of a geek out on his chart for you. He's a singer, and he's got the 1/8 channel. The 1 really is all about creative expression. So I love to kind of really see, like, this is a person who loves to sing, which is almost like the purest expression of that the creative in the 1, the gate 1. Now, his core talent is the 35, which is all about experiences. This is almost like the culmination of human experience. And really, this is so much of what he talks about. When you listen to him speak, he shares so many of his own stories. He does have the 56. He's got the storyteller as well. And he shares so many stories from the Z's as well. What I do think is cool, and I'm going to go back to the music piece, he started his career wanting to pursue music, but then he kind of went down this spiritual path, and the channeling and becoming, a leader in that area really kind of became the most prominent thing for him. But what I love is he actually has the 1 in his north node on the design side and the 2 in his south node on the design side. So I really feel like the fact that he came to his music after his Uranus opposition is kind of no surprise, because that's the muscle that he was building in this lifetime. Also, that the 2 is something that he was born in with, something very that he knows really, really well. And of course, to me, I feel like channeling is a version of receiving, because it's just receiving information, correct? So again, just love to really geek out to see how these expressions of our chart show up in real life humans. Anyway, I'm going to let you get to the interview, and I hope to see you on Lee's Australian tour. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Now, today I get to talk to one of my favorite guests again, because he has an incredible new book and a tour that us Aussies are also going to get to enjoy. So, Lee Harris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. And I equally was looking forward to being with you, because I love your energy and the times that we've spoken before. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I really want to kick off by talking about this book, Future Human, which you and your dear friend Regina Meredith created. Again, I love this idea of you having someone that you're close to ask you questions, or at least the Z's questions about, in this case, the future and this big transformation that we're going through. And for me, I love the conversational experience of it. And I feel like it's really cool having someone ask great questions, because so often I'm sort of reading along or listening along and going, it's already percolating in my mind, and boom, there's the next question. I just love it. So let's kick off with, what is this book all about, and what was the original inspiration for Future Human?
So Regina Meredith has been, she's many people already know who she is. She's had a show on Gaia TV called Open Minds that I think is in its 23rd season. But before that, she had the Conscious Media Network, which she co-founded with her then husband. So prior to that, she was a journalist. And what she discovered in journalism was the whole story was not being told, and it was being censored, and it was being edited. And she saw that from the inside of the newsroom. So that lit a fire in her around, no, there are alternative things that are very positive for humanity that we aren't allowed to share. So she went off on this quest for her career, which she's now been, I think it's over 3 decades, Regina has been bringing conscious media to the forefront. So she and I became friends a little over a decade ago when I first met her and was first interviewed by her. And we've always said, let's do something together in the future. We've done a few little things. She wrote the foreword for my first book, Energy Speaks. But we'd always put a pin in, we're going to collaborate. And then quite suddenly there was this window of time and this quite unusual opportunity that arose for me where I had like a gap for a book. And we literally had a conversation about it. And I think it was 5 weeks later, we were in a recording studio in England doing it.
Wow.
Which is rare. Like so much of my stuff now has to be planned. So that there was something magic about that, first of all. And secondly, because she is Regina, she asks the most fascinating questions because she's constantly speaking to scientists, people who work with consciousness, healers. She's all about where are we going, what's going on, and how can we tap into what's more possible for us as a humanity versus what we're being given or what we're not being given. So I knew she would be a brilliant running buddy. And my only clause with her was I said, there's so much doom and gloom in the world. I said, and even though I know we're going to talk about some of the more shadowy aspects of life, because that's an area that she's always investigating, I said, it needs to feel, I said, I just want to make sure that we put something out there that puts the truth back in everyone's hands, which is, we are all walking in these possible future timelines, but we have incredible power to alter our future in the now. So I have always maintained, as someone who gave private readings for 15 years, the way to use a reading from anybody, whether it's a psychic or a medium, is to take on board the possible information they're giving you and then use it like a transformational tool to go, oh, no, I don't want to repeat that toxic relationship I just got out of, and you've just predicted another one for me in 6 months. Oh, you can go into fear and go, oh my God, I'm going to go into a toxic relationship in 6 months. Or you can go, interesting, that's still on my timeline. What work do I need to do to unpick this? So as someone who myself is constantly working with and seeing future timelines, I've learned that they are a navigation system by which we can choose to say yes or no. So this book goes everywhere. AI, the systems of the future, the journey of the soul as we go into such a technological world and how we have to protect the soul. There are those of us who are on the planet who are here to be custodians of protecting the soul as we go through this jagged journey where technology and certain people would like to see technology be in charge of everything. And the Z's talk about what a risk that is, but they also talk about what the positives of AI and technology are. So it goes everywhere, and it's pretty meaty and pretty full. But the people who've read it so far have found it actually very uplifting, which is sounds like hopefully the aim that we had has come through.
Yeah, I love that because I know my personal experience. I'm very the same. I really believe that everything is possibility and everything, we do have free will. And I love that as we move forward, we can either resist, we can try and sort of dig our heels in, we can be like, I don't want to be a part of that. But all we're doing is being in our ego, we're being in our shadow. It's this ability to work with the energy. And that's why I love the way that the Z's talk about it, is because it's like, this is all pure potential. So how do we, make the most of that? How do we rise to that occasion? I love that you just touched on AI because I'm fascinated by AI. To be honest, as a dyslexic human, I have found it's one of my best friends because it can really like get a lot of information together for me where in the past it would literally send me into anxiety to try and do these things. Um, However, I can see that there's this other side where, like you said, there's these people or entities that actually want it to be leading and taking over. So that is somewhere that I want to come back to. But as you were speaking, the journey of the soul, like that sounds fantastic. Can we talk a little bit about that as we are going through this hugely transformational time? In human design, we talk about the big shift, the new paradigm comes in 2027. We're already feeling that. The age of Aquarius, we're moving from, this very, and human design says the same, this very patriarchal time, this very community, everyone's kind of, you're meant to look after everyone else. And we're now moving to this, you do you, babe, this time. So can you talk a little bit about this journey of the soul? How can we be connected to that journey and allow it to guide us as opposed to us giving our power away to everyone out there?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think I know I am one of many, many, many around the world who I guess have made that our work in a way. So I can't give one conclusive statement, but I can talk in some concepts about it, I guess. But before I go there, one thing that really the book talks about is noticing the difference between when humans are being sold a story that the robots and AI are going to come in and take this off your hands, versus here's where technology and humanity can collaborate.
Oh, I
And
love that.
that's something to really pay attention to. I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas. I was on a trip to Las Vegas for a concert about 6 months ago, and I went into this, very high tech dome called the Sphere, and it was interesting. Let's put it that way. There's a whole load of robots you meet in the foyer, and there was a very dark edge to it for me. There were some things I was like, oh, okay, but there's something very sinister about the whole thing too, in the way that it was being sold to us as humans. And there was this sign at the side of this robot, and it basically said, this robot's going to help you and take certain tasks off your hands so that you have more time for relaxing. And I was like, nothing in our system right now has made everything so equitable for everybody that people have time to relax. So why would we think that, like, where is the documentation that talks in governments about people are overworked and things aren't fair in the money system? Like, there's none of that. So I
No.
was going, yeah, I'm sorry. No, nice try. And I was watching all this stuff, all this kind of like, this is going to be great. And I was like, how? How is this going to be great? You need to break it down. Just the other day, I heard about Uber's plan. The Uber CEO has said in 10 years, there'll be no more drivers and it will all be automatic cars. So my immediate sense of loss is Uber conversations are some of my favorites when I'm traveling the
Same.
world and I meet angels in those cars.
Yep.
And then I thought, well, what are they going to do? Like, have we thought of a replacement, or are we just letting money and control and power drive the conversation? And yet again, humans are getting increasingly left behind and therefore more disposable and more useless. So I thought, So for me, that's how I'm seeing evidence of this conversation. And I do think we as a people need to challenge those in power who either, there's probably a very small percentage who are driving it, and then it's all the ones who have to agree to vote these things in who maybe aren't driving it, don't really know much about it. But, we know that people get swayed and bribed and all kinds of stuff goes on, which is why I think this is a time of revolution for us. I think this is a time where we have to, those of us that can and have the bandwidth to, because there are many people who are so in the system and struggling, they don't have time for anything other than survival. But I think those of us who have either an eye on this or a passion for this or the bandwidth for this, it is our job to start questioning the speed at which a very technological future is being built and at whose expense. So for me, that's where that question comes from. And as for the soul and the journey of the soul, What the Z's said is what will remain unique in the years to come is the soul of humanity. But many of the things that are being brought in are designed not to be in tandem with the soul of humanity, but to push people down, quash them. So you could see it the way things are now. Like, why is financial education not part of our education systems? Why has that never been something we were taught? Oh, because then we won't question it. We won't know how to rise above the financial system that we're all serving. So there are lots of questions we're going to need to ask as we go forward. But the Z said the soul cannot be crushed, but it can be dimmed, ring fenced, and that is kind of where we're going to have to really keep our eye on things as we go forward. So just jumping on another thing. Oh, AI produced music. Great. You can have Adele or Harry Styles singing a song you've never heard. Okay. At what point are we going to miss the feeling of someone's soul? At what point are people going to go, oh, I missed this? So that's actually what they say in the book. A lot of us will be working to safeguard in the years to come, because you can tell the vibrational difference, but you have to have been trained to bring your senses online to do that. So I think that's why people are turning to their intuition, their senses, their spirit, their sense of something beyond the increasingly limited system that many of us are being given, I think. So around the houses conversation, but that's what comes to me when you bring
Oh,
that.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's, I've often wondered with, whether it's the music or it's writing a book or whatever it is and getting AI involved, I always come back to frequency. I mean, I'm always banging on about frequency. And every time, like when we write books, we are putting our frequency into that book. Like there's plenty of books out there that perhaps aren't as good as other books that have had great success, and it's my belief it's because it's the frequency of the author, it's the energy that they put into it. So I'm really curious to see, if AI is creating so much and it's not putting a frequency into it, or if the frequency that it's putting into it is a lower frequency. I'm curious to see, like, how will that affect its success? Are we just in this time right now where we're all caught up with the new toy and we're a little bit like, oh, let's just see what's going on? But over time, I mean, it doesn't have a soul. So at the end of the day, it's got to come down to frequency, because we create everything from our frequency, right?
Yes, and it's interesting you say that about the new toy, because there is a section in The Future Human where Regina asks some questions about us and technology, and they basically say you're in the infant stage. As a society, you're no longer a baby, but you're just kind of learning to walk and identify things. And I thought, oh, it's true, isn't it? I mean, I feel, I'm trying to think, when did I first remember like websites and things being normal? And probably 25 years ago, like 1998, 1999, websites were happening. But really, it's probably the last 15 to 20 years that it has become so commonplace. So, yeah, frequency is important, because how do things make you feel? And I don't know if you've noticed this. There's very little I can watch these days in terms of films, documentaries, or television shows. And I used to enjoy certain films, certain TV shows as like things that were like, okay, great, let's live through a story, let's experience a story that's going to give me a feeling. And I find that particularly with scripted television or film these days, the even if the production quality is really high or the acting's really good, the frequency seems dumbed down to me. Like, it's like, we're going to have to watch this story for 8 hours. You could have done this in 45 minutes. And my friend argued, she said, well, it's because we're all watching TikTok videos. And I said, I can't do TikTok. It's too fast for
Neither.
me. I'm the wrong generation. But I said, I hear what you're saying. We have got used to shorter attention span, but it's not just that. I feel like there are innovations that could be happening in filmmaking, television, and occasionally you see them that seem just locked. Because if you think about it, everyone's attention is on those things. So the more soulless those things become, the more people get used to things being soulless. Like the Marvel movies that would, there were some that were fantastically creative and inventive, But I always switch off when it turns into a CGI fight for the last 25 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay. The
Yeah.
good part of the story is done, and now we're just, and I get that some people like those, and I'm not taking that away from the action fans, but I don't know, there's something about when does the soul disappear, and I think we're seeing evidence of it all around us, and I also see more people choosing something different. They're like, no, I don't just want to sit home and watch TV. I've actually started a community evening with local people twice a month, and we come round and we get these cards out that make us ask questions. I see people craving more of that. I think we just haven't yet developed enough of the things that will serve that need for us. But I think we're all doing it in small, localized ways. And some of us, create things on a bigger scale for people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I have this same thing with, because the one time I really switch off is I'll watch something, whether it's a show. And the thing that I've noticed, the thing for me is I have a lot of trouble as well because there's so much violence. There's so much, blood and gore. And the thing I'm always looking for is something that has great relationships, like development of characters. And I think that's one of the areas where, and honestly, like one of my highest values is connection. So I love it. And it's funny you say that. We've created a mastermind of local entrepreneurs to do exactly that so that we can connect. And I think this is this piece where we are being told that we're getting lonelier and lonelier. We have this awful global epidemic of, I think in the US, the highest killer of men under 45 is suicide or something like that. Like we have this huge loneliness epidemic. In my world, what I'm seeing, and I appreciate my little world is tiny compared to the rest of the world, but I'm seeing people come back to this connection. I'm seeing them want connection. They want to see, whether it's their entertainment, they want to see people connect. They want to see people develop, friendships, relationships. I want to do that. I'm so done with the surface level stuff, if you like. And I'm really curious because I love in Future Human how you talk about, or the Z's talk about, this shift into the heart. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, are you kidding me? Because over the last, I probably learnt heart coherence meditation and I read everything on heart math probably 5, 6, could have been 7 or 8 years ago. But in the last 2 years, I'm obsessed with heart coherence meditation, with actually connecting into my heart, asking my heart, being guided by my heart. So can you talk to what the Z's are talking about with this transformation for us really getting out of this head, this mind, and starting to get into our heart? Are you looking to build a successful human design or astrology business? Do you wish that you had your own chart tool on your website so you don't have to send people somewhere else to get it? BodyGraph.com provides all the resources you need to turn this vision into a reality. We use this incredible software in our business to provide charts and custom reading reports at the click of a button, generate leads, and bring in lots of passive revenue. BodyGraph.com has already helped coaches and entrepreneurs generate over $2.5 million in revenue. If you're ready to take your business seriously, start with a free trial and use the code HumanDesignPodcast to get 30% off for 6 months. Here's what you can do with BodyGraph.com. Embed stunning charts directly into your website, build personalized lead magnets to grow your email list, create and sell detailed reading reports, and even use their free website builder to get started fast. BodyGraph.com is the ultimate all-in-one platform for building your human design or astrology business. If you're ready to join the community of successful entrepreneurs, visit bodygraph.com and start building your dream business today. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code Human Design Podcast to get 30% off for 6 months.
Yeah, so the one quote that comes to mind, because they've used it quite a bit, is heart energy is the currency of the future.
Oh.
And they've said that many times over the years. And so it may even be in the book again, I'm not sure. But heart energy is the currency of the future. And like you, Emma, I can speak personally about this for a minute. I notice, I'm 48 now, and I really started as a student of self-growth and metaphysics at the age of 16. So I'm a 32-year-old student right now. And, I've noticed in my own life more of an ability both within me and my programming, or my, my wound template, or whatever you want to call it, more of an ability to have heartfelt conversations than I ever used to be in possession of.
Yeah.
Because some of the barriers have come down, or I've healed certain areas. But it's not ever just about us, it's also what's going on societally. Like, there are people who will share feelings in conversation that I was hungry for 32 years ago, when I felt like no one was talking about anything real. I was like, well, hang on, that person just said that to me, but I know their feelings said something else, because I didn't fully understand how intuitive I was at the time. So I think that going back to what you just said about the epidemic of men who we're now seeing with death by suicide, um, that loneliness, I think men, if you look at, one of the core issues men have had hoisted upon them, of my generation and above, especially, is not being allowed to talk, not being allowed to show your vulnerability. It's not manly. I think, thank God, that's changing in the younger generations. And we were the bridge generation that moved from our parents' generation, where it was dangerous to talk, and often they were just trying to survive, like what they were coming out of. We were kind of the middle generation who had the luxury of a bit more time and space, and they were able to shield us a bit more so that we could. And now the younger generation are really fast at it and adept at it. So going back to heart energy as the currency of the future, I think that openness that we can find with people that we really like and care about, it's really important to cultivate that. I've often said to someone, even if you've only got two friends that you can speak openly and honestly to, make sure you stay connected to them. Even if I've got other friends, you're like, God, I need to speak to them. It's been 3 months. Okay, good. But make sure you stay connected to the two friends that you have absolute fluency and trust with. Because the more you can lean into that with them, and the more they can lean into that with you, the more it becomes normal. And then the more normal that becomes for you, you become a better advocate and ambassador of leading it in those conversations. That's one of the things I'm old enough now that I'm like, oh, it's my job to lead. Like,
Yeah.
at a younger time, because I've always had older friends and older mentors, it was them educating me. And now I'm like, oh, I'm with a 28-year-old. Hang on, Lee. Just like I'm in that middle age phase where I'm realizing, oh yeah, come on. So sometimes my job is to lead, and sometimes my job is to seek the reciprocal people, and to make sure that I'm with the reciprocal people enough that I start to normalize the way we converse. So then when I get into a very high contrast with someone else, I'm like, oh, okay, this is not really a conversation where I can be free to express and be in the frequency I like being in. So either this will be a shorter conversation, or maybe we won't really see each other much. But then equally, when I find someone who lights up about that conversation, I'm like, so that's how we create it. It doesn't necessarily look like we're waving a wand and creating heart energy, but what we're actually doing is as we attend to each improved conversation with people, where we can just be in our heart. And I think you notice it more because you notice you're doing it more with strangers.
Yeah.
Back in the day, for me, it was safe people. And I'm a bit like a cat. Like, I'm not an extrovert when you first meet me. I'm an extrovert in my work, but in my personal life, I like to be at the edge of the room. I like to observe. I like to see who someone is. And then when I know you, I'll be completely fluent with you. But until I've sussed that out, I'm not just going to come in with all words blazing. So, but what I've noticed is I'm having it more with strangers, and I'm having it with people I've never met. And I'm like, oh, that was, again, I go back to the Uber drivers. Some of the intimate conversations you can have with people that you'll never see again is beautiful. I'm really enjoying that aspect of where we are in the world, because it's massively different to what was a wound for me 30 odd years ago in society. And now I'm like, wow, people talk about all these things now. Hallelujah. How nice is this?
I love that. I love that. And have you ever read, or have you read The Highly Sensitive People? Do you know if you're a highly sensitive person?
Oh, I'm sure I'm.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
haven't read it, but I know of the book. Is it Elaine Aron?
Yes.
I've
Yes.
never, I only heard about the book like 5 years ago. But if it had been put in my hands 25 years ago, I would have really needed it. And who knows, maybe I should read it now.
Because it changed my life, because I was so similar to you. Like I was that kid that everyone was like, oh, if only she'd come out of her shell and she's this and she's that. And reading the highly sensitive person, that's exactly what they do. They start kind of come into a room and they are so switched on to everything that's going on. I'm exactly the same. I'm the most introverted extrovert you'll ever see. Everyone would think I'm
Right,
extroverted, but I'm
right,
absolutely not.
right. And I always
And
make that joke to my audiences at the shows we do on the tour, or any workshops I do. I always make the joke at the beginning. I know you're sensitive. I really appreciate that you came here. There are the exit signs. I've got you. I understand. I also check where the exit signs are. So yeah, a huge portion of my audience are people who would identify as being sensitive in one way or another.
yeah, and I love what you were saying about the Uber driver because I think this is one of the places where, and it doesn't have to be an Uber driver because I have over the years, as you have, come out of my shell, and I love to talk to people that I don't know, and I mean I'm not going to walk up to people, but the Uber driver is the perfect example, and I love those moments when they they say, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, I blah, 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 blah." And you literally just see this human go, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" And I have to know everything. And those are those moments that I really feel like, wow, I do live in a bubble, and this is why I love what I do because I want to expand that bubble because I want people to understand how much power they have. And you talking about this, building this heart connection with people, it is so important because, again, what you were saying, you then become the leader. One of the things I've noticed is even with this mastermind, so I have this business mastermind with these incredible women, like hugely, my business is just the little business in the group. Like these are big, successful global businesses, Australian businesses. And then I'll be the one that says something really open and vulnerable, and they all just look at me like, oh my God, can we go there? Let's go there. So I feel like we are in this time where, like you said, even whether we identify with being a leader or not, it almost doesn't matter because it's if you have that connection to the heart and the courage to start to talk about these more vulnerable things or heart-led topics, then you make it okay for everybody else. You're giving everyone else permission to go there instead of talking about the weather.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because to your point, we're all a leader in some area of our life. If you have a pet, you are a leader. If you have a child, you are a leader. If you have a friend that you're picking up off the floor one day, you are a leader. So I feel like we all move through this leader role all the time, and we also are the beneficiaries of someone else leading us. So the leader thing is a loaded word, isn't it? I think particularly in our world of work there's often this idea about a leader and all that stuff. But to what you just said, I've just had some beautiful conversations with my family around how people like to talk about this stuff now. So, my family are very supportive of me. And my brother is definitely on his own spiritual awakening path the last 15 years, which happened for him separate from me. But, we stay in radio about it. And my mum and my sister, not so much, but very open, big hearted. They'll do anything for everybody. But we just had this big discussion this week about how many of their friends who recently came to see a London show that I did in Covent Garden, the end of our, tour in Europe and the UK, were there, and the kinds of conversations it has sponsored. And not just because of my show. I think it was also that what I'm noticing is in groups like family friends or people who I would never have thought would go for this kind of thing will occasionally, like when I meet them, they'll like sidle up to me, they'll go, I've been watching your energy updates and they've been really helpful. Thank you. And I'm like, Uncle Jim is watching.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I would never have sent it to him because I would think, well, this is just going to be a load of double Dutch. And, you're going to think, what? And that, I don't care what you think of me, but I just wouldn't have thought it would be helpful. And what that tells me is we are becoming a more educated society around emotional awareness, around spiritual awareness to some degree, but spiritual is tricky because I always say there is no such thing as a spiritual person. There are millions of different types of spiritual people. You know, when someone says, "Oh, Emma, you'll love this person, they're spiritual," I'm like, well, what kind of spiritual?
Yeah, yeah.
There's the lovely in their heart people, and I get on with all of those. And then there's the people who know everything about the ninth dimension, but will be rude to the waiter. And I'm not going to be
Mm,
with those people. So no offense, they can do what that's just, they're not my people.
yeah.
So, you know, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? But I do think what you're describing in your leadership group, and this comes through the messages a lot, because I use the Z's for the energy updates I do every month. I get themes from them, and then I interpret them on a more human level. And they have been saying for years, people are hungry for this kind of connection. People are hungry for this kind of conversation. So we often are the leaders, because for us, we've all been doing this for years. And it's normal to us to be in a workshop room or a conversation where someone's crying. That doesn't freak us out. But if
Yeah.
you're new to that, you're like, oh my God, I just cried when I went to Emma's house and we had coffee. And is that okay? And Emma said it was okay, but I've never done that with a friend. We all know that's okay. But if it's your first time, you do need a steadying hand and a calm heart and someone just saying it's okay, you know, because all of
Mm,
us went through that. I remember myself going through feeling embarrassed about being so emotional at a workshop when I was like 19, because I didn't know I was allowed to be, even though I was in an environment where they were encouraging it. I'm like, oh, should I be embarrassed? Are people thinking about me? You know, all that stuff. But no, they're not thinking about you. But when you're
they're
in the,
way too busy thinking about
of
themselves.
course, and if they are thinking about you, they're missing the workshop.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the stuff that we all have, the thoughts and the programming emotionally and psychologically that's held us in place. And at a certain point, whether it's an awful divorce or a tragedy or the death of a loved one, or you literally just have a spiritual awakening, something comes along and goes, and you're like, oh, nothing is the same. I
Yeah.
still don't know what anything means, and I'm a little confused about my new reality, but something just dislodged in me. And a lot of people are going through that right now, and often using the catalyst of what the hell is going on in the world and all this awful destruction. I've never seen anything like this. So, you know, there's that too. So I think all of us can be heart leaders for people who are in shock or horror or going through a wave of something that you can tell for them is very new. But for the rest of us, we might be quite practiced with going through this wave of emotion or this kind of experience.
I love that. It reminds me of that Rumi quote, you know, the crack is where the light gets in. And
Mm.
I feel like I know for me, I had that awakening, you know, 20 something years ago. And I feel like there's so many people now that they're being cracked open. And there's enough people that have, and I'm going to actually use the word normalized. You know, that's what I found in because I have a similar kind of family around me. I have a very small family actually, but my in-laws or my ex-in-laws, you know, it's been beautiful seeing especially my ex-mother-in-law just open up, like start to see that there's more to life. And I actually had my godfather who is was my dad's best friend at school, and I was talking to him a couple of months ago, and my mother passed away last year, and sorry, the year before last, but we were talking about mom, we were talking about dad, and we're talking about the work that I do in the world. And my godfather was one of the best anaesthetists in Australia. So he's very old school, very like you get a sensible job and career and then you master it. And he just said out of the blue, he said, I've been listening to your podcast. It's fantastic. And it absolutely floored me because I was like, you pardon? You're 80 something years old and you're listening to my podcast. And not only that, but you think it's good. And for me, that's evidence of change. That's evidence that the world really is changing.
I'm laughing in complete recognition of that moment, and I also have gone, "Oh, I'm like, you know, I've left parties, go, wow, I can't believe they, you know, I just didn't expect it." So I agree with you, and I do think, you know, some people use the term mental health or mental wellness, but I do think that self wellness is being normalized in a, and I'll use self wellness is a weird term, but you know what I mean. There's
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily that everyone's becoming spiritual, but I do think people are beginning to understand that we are a system that we can work with and that we can make improvements to and that we can encourage beyond habits that are hurting us or are limiting us. And I think certainly for our parents' generation, that was not the world most of them grew up in. We have had the luxury of the spread of information. I think the internet, I mean, you and I would not be doing what we're doing if the internet hadn't come along. And that to me is one of the positive sides of the internet. I can go on YouTube. I'm like, why won't this remote work? And I go on YouTube and some lovely man in Dublin has left me a video and I'm like, this is amazing,
So good.
You just type in Sony, whatever the remote is, and this sweet man, and you get to see his kitchen. I love that. I'm like, this is brilliant. He's done this really well. That's pretty amazing. That didn't exist when we were growing up.
So one of the things I would love you to talk to is what the guidance disease gave us in the book around all of this chaos, disaster. We're looking out at this world that, like it's scary. And, there's people like you and I that have been on this journey and we kind of know like, what you see is probably not really what's going on. However, it feels like it is. So how do people connect to their heart? How do people actually really empower themselves, embody in love, all of these things as we navigate through a really challenging time in human history?
Well, first of all, I think, we're all going to be called to help where we can. So, we've just gone through the fires here in Los Angeles, which were really like a whole other level. And so the amount of community support and rallying round and helping each other, as you always see whenever there's a disaster like this, it's just a reminder of the goodness of the majority of humanity. And in a way, I always think that to me is really important for us to take note of, especially when media control is so prevalent. Like I had a friend because I was away during the fires and then I came back at the tail end of it. And a friend said, "Oh my God, is it just awful? Are people just so depressed?" And da da da. And I said, "Oh, no, that is an element of it. But there are other elements too that, of course, is not making it to the media. All people are seeing is the repetition of these biblical images and these horrific images." And so I was reminded of the kind of fear-based slant that traditional media has lived with for so long. And Regina confirmed this. I did an interview with her for my podcast about the book that will be coming out, I think, in early March. And she said that even when she was a journalist in the 80s, positive stories would come across what she called, I think she referred to it as the ticker, which is how they got their information. And she would be blocked from running those stories. They would say, no, go for the dramatic one because that gets the ratings. Is it that it gets the ratings? Or is it that's what someone at the top is feeding the people down the ladder? So I think, first of all, you have to, and again, this comes back to knowing your vibration and knowing how things affect you. Did it do you a lot of good to go online today and read a million bad news headlines from around the world? Like, is that what motivated your activism or your desire to help? Great, that worked for you. For someone else, it sent them into a depression spiral because they are watching the world rather than being in and of the world. And this is the danger of our technological time. We've all kind of been trained to watch things and listen to things and trained away from being with each other biologically in that biological relay that we have as humans, or being in nature biologically in that biological relay that we have, where so much information comes to us. So it's not to demonize technology as an information source, but it is to ask yourself, wow, I've been depressed for 4 weeks and I hadn't made the connection that all I'm doing is watching the world's horror stories. And the world's horror stories is actually not the only story on earth right now. There are millions of small stories on my street, and we live meters away from someone who's having the best year of their life, and you're going through the worst year of your life. That can happen. So a lot of it is, I think, understanding what you are using the doom scrolling for and getting honest with yourself. Because I've met many people who like to doom scroll and then tell me a highly charged emotional story about what's happening in the world. And if I know them well enough, I will point out to them, oh, that's interesting. That's what your emotions are doing. No, no, it's not my emotions. It's the stories. And no, it is your emotions, because I saw 3 of the same stories and I have a different frequency response to you. So there is something about us owning what we're exposing ourselves to, paying attention to how it affects us. Now to go big picture. The Z's say that the reason that we are seeing the collapse of so much is because consciousness is rising. And when general consciousness rises, so too will, whatever you want to call it, the shadow, the control, the lower vibration. I just did an opening broadcast for my annual Rebirth course, which is an online transformation thing. It's now in its 8th year. And in the opening channel, there was something that really caught my attention. The Z said, the reason you despair about what you see in the systems of the world right now and what you see going on as all the challenges and problems is where they are man-made things. So, humans deciding to go to war with another country, which again is out of our hands. Those decisions are made at the top level. The question is, how do we respond to the fact they've been made? And I think there's an increasing voice on the planet around, why are we doing this? What's going on? But what they said was, those vibrations that are running those things, those manipulations of people, those oppressions of people, they are coming from a far lower vibration than the vibration you're pulsing at. So they said, be careful of this idea that everything's a mirror, because that's a very popular spiritual phrase. Some people go, well, this many people are being killed in that country, so that must be a mirror of the murderer in me. And on some level, you if you really want to unpick and unpack that, sure, you could keep going down the fractal and get to some aspect, but that can also just lead you to bypass and be inactive. And actually what the Z's were saying was, the low vibration you're seeing dotted around the planet, try and remember, it's not you. It's not most people on the planet at that vibration, but there is an old system in place that is currently being exposed for its corruption, for its inequity, and for its, shall we say, desire or drive to hold humanity down. Because there's so much potential that we all have, that we can all offer. And our potential has been clamped. That's what the Z's have said. And it's been in operation for thousands and thousands of years. But this is the time where the clamp starts to break. So it's messy because we don't yet see enough of the future solutions. But they've always said that 2025 onwards, they've said this since 2016. They said 2025 onwards is the year you will start to see more evidence of the new future. They said it doesn't mean the problems will go away overnight, but you will start to see increasing evidence of the future start to appear in the world once you get past 2024 and you get into 2025. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I personally feel the truth of a certain lightness in this year that is juxtaposed with some of the darkness and the heaviness, sure. But there's definitely a strength and a lightness that I feel about 2025 that I can't say I've felt for quite a few years. And I'm interested to see how things play out around that feeling I have.
Oh, I love that. There's so much there as well that I want to respond to. I think that doom scrolling, from a behavioral perspective, it's just this connection piece. We're so desperate for connection that if we're not getting it in a resourceful way, we get it on Instagram. And I love what you said. We need to take responsibility for that, because whatever goes in is helping to create your reality. So what are you choosing to put your attention on? Because that's having the biggest impact. I know we actually had awful floods a few years ago, and the same thing happened where the media told this terrible story, whereas the story that we all experienced was one of huge community coming together and support. And there was so many beautiful stories. And I remember going through my Instagram then and literally just getting rid of all of these people that I followed that were choosing to tell the negative story, as opposed to choosing to see the potential or, the connection that's a little bit more resourceful. So I feel like that is such a big piece of what all of this is about. It's really, how are you getting connection? Are you getting it from a place of drama and gossip and those sort of things? Or are you actually getting out of your comfort zone, going back to what we were talking about, connecting to your heart and connecting from this really resourceful place? Because I really believe that so much of the challenge people are having right now is just because they continue to give their power away to all of the terrible things, as opposed to saying, well, look, I can't control what government goes to war with what government. I can't control that, but what do I have power over? And the person I'm being, that's what I have power over. So I think this is such a huge time of awakening where we realize that the power does lie within us, because we do, when we all get our energy together, we have so much power. We have more power than the few, but we have to wake up to that. And I think that's so much of, at least for me, what Future Human really talks about. Like, we got to wake up to this power that is within us, because it's so much greater when we all come together.
Yeah. And you really see that, don't you? You really see the power of people and we as a group, which funnily enough is why when we were talking to our designer, Trent, about the book cover, we wanted it to be a group of people holding hands, like different people from all walks of life holding hands, working together. Because even though the book is called The Future Human, it really is the future humans, and who we will be together and how we will work together and collaborate with each other.
I love it. So let's talk about the tour. Like, what are we going to see? What are we going to experience? I'm so excited. Can't wait.
Well, the tour has been such a massive gift because we had this idea, and I felt very strongly once we got through all the, COVID stuff, and because we were supposed to come to Australia in 2020, I was gutted because I had come and brought workshops to Australia in 2012 and 2016. So we were just at the early part of 2020 beginning to organize an end of 2020 tour because I was determined not to break my every 4-year streak. And I was hoping I could improve on every 4 years. And so anyway, long story short, this tour is something we started in North America. And the desire was I do a lot of work online and a lot of videos. But you can't beat being live in the room with people, and not just being live in the room with your favorite concert artist or spiritual speaker. That, when I go, so I've seen Tori Amos live, like, I don't know, 14 times. And I'm always happy when I get there. I'm like, oh yeah, it's the Tori people. Yeah. I don't hang out with them in the 2 years between the tours. It's not like I don't really have Tori friends. But I love seeing the tribe. I'm like, I know you people. I've seen you people for 20 years. And I feel, and then, you do meet people and talk to them. And so I wanted to do an event that was both a digestible experience. So sure, you can do a 1-day workshop or a 2-day workshop, but not everyone can commit to that or afford that or the time, or they're not interested. They want to taste test you first. So I thought, how can I make an evening a really full meal? I don't want to just stand there and talk for an hour. I want to give people an experience. So we decided to fuse the music that we have created over all these years in workshop rooms, and then COVID allowed us to really produce the albums because Devor couldn't travel and we weren't doing workshops. So that's really what the tour is. It's a multi-dimensional, it's a 3.5-hour experience with a 30-minute interval. So it's 3 hours, and I will take you through a guided meditation, channeling for yourself. I channel Aziz, and the way I kick off the evening, apart from a brief part where I explain who I am, and mainly to the people who've been dragged along, because there's always a good number. I ask who's been dragged along by your parent, your friend or your spouse or whatever, and a good number of hands go up. And I always say, "You're the bravest, thank you." But I do a little bit of explanation, and then I give the themes of the night. So much like an energy update, I tune in usually 2 hours before I take the stage. And I receive 3 themes that audience are going to benefit from having focus on that night. So we get the 3 themes, and I walk the audience through the 3 themes, and then we come back to them in part 2, and I invite 3 people to ask a question, 1 on each theme. And the way it works, the person who asked the question focuses for so many people. And then we weave about 10 or 11 songs through the night that I've heard from people who've been there. The songs give people a place to land and process. So as they sit and listen to the song, they get to process what just went on. And on a couple of the songs, I invite everyone to sing with us, which is lovely. So it's a real, like, people have described it as a spiritual variety show or a, and my goal was, can we create a format that's really multidimensional? But of course, we didn't know it was going to work until we did the first night in Santa Monica. So we'll be concluding this tour in Australia and New Zealand. So we start in Auckland, and then we go to, I'm not sure what the order is, but I think it's Byron Bay, Brisbane, Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne, or maybe it's Sydney, Adelaide, Melbourne. So yeah, and we're doing 2 nights in Byron Bay because the one we put out has already sold out. So
Of course it has.
we're jazzed. We're so jazzed, and we love doing it. And there's just something about being in a room with however many hundreds of people in each venue and going through that experience together. And my favorite feedback is when I get emails or messages that say, I'm still on a high from the show 3 weeks later, and I'm still thinking about my future in a different way. And I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. Then we did our job, you know?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love it. I'm so excited to see you here in Byron, and it's going to be fascinating. Like, I'm already. Oh my God, what are our 3 themes going to be?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because we are very much a very spiritual community here. But I love that you're getting to see at least all of the east coast of Australia. It's going to be super fun.
Yes, I'm sorry, Perth. We tried, and there was a venue, and it disappeared. Unfortunately, you know, in the way, I don't know if anyone, probably most people don't know how tours get planned, but you have to have all of these venues that sync up at the same time. And Perth was on the slate, and unfortunately, the venue we had just disappeared at the last minute. So don't worry, we'll come next time. And my goal, if I can, is could we tour every 2 years? And so, I've already earmarked early 2027 for a return to Australia, because our next tour will be different. We'll have different format, different songs. So yeah, this is the conclusion of the Big Love Tour, and I'm so thrilled that we're finally getting it to you guys.
Well, so am I. I'm super thrilled. And I love the music. I love the albums. We play them a lot at
Oh,
the
thank you.
retreats. Because my energy is a manifesting generator, like when I'm working, I'm like so much energy. So I so often just listen to your music just to ground me again. Or in the morning when I'm meditating, I just love it. It's the best.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Super excited.
And by
So
the way, I'm excited that we're going to have a home cooked meal at your house.
I know. Me
That's
too.
very exciting, because when you're on tour, it's like restaurants and takeaway, So thank you very much. And I can't wait to hang out with you personally too.
It's going to be fun. We'll cook up a beautiful meal and we'll have a few laughs for sure.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I should probably let you go. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to make sure we put everything in the show notes, everybody. We will put everything we'll even put a link to the music, but obviously the Big Love Tour. We're going to put all the information on Future Human. But where else can people find you, Lee? Just in case they're like, oh my God, I love this human. He's new to me.
Right. So yeah, leeharrisenergy.com is my main website. And then the music is leeharrismusic.com. But if you type in Lee Harris Energy on YouTube, you'll go to my YouTube channel where we put loads of free videos, including my monthly energy update, which I do for around the first day of every month. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff out there. And thank you, Emma, for having me, letting me talk about the book and the tour, and just for everything that you do. Like I said, I love your energy, the way you do it. I felt an immediate simpatico with you when I first met you. So yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I am super excited that I get to see you in real life, and that all the Aussies actually get to come along and see you in real life too. So thank you so much.
And all the Aussies, by the way, are the best. Like I've told my team this, because I think most people in my team predate when I last, or no, they're post my 2016 tour in Australia. But I've always said, and I've told Devor, I said, every time I've worked with the Australians, I love being with them, because there's a warmth and there's a groundedness and there's a connection that's very particular to Australia. And so I'm really jazzed to come back.
Thank you.
True.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's funny and I think so many young Australians have this experience is like when I was in my early 20s and I did my travel around Europe and, did all the backpacking. That was when I first realized how different we are,
Mm,
because you are the first to get a job. You're the first to be invited along somewhere. You're the first to be open, welcomed with open arms. And I was kind of like, I think we must be different to other people because it happens to Aussies all the time. So
cool.
thank you for recognizing us.
It's not hard. And I grew up when I was working in London in my early 20s, it was always the Australian people in the company that you wanted to be next to because they were friendly, they were warm, they were open, they weren't reserved about things that we British people had been trained to be reserved about. So, no, Australians are like the secret sauce for any good gathering, I think.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, from one secret source to all those listeners out there, thank you so much for being here, Lee. Thank you, everyone, for listening along, and go and get your tickets. And I'll see you there in Byron Bay. And I trust you got what you needed from today's episode. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now.